My name is Liam Carter. I'm 28 years old and I work construction in a small suburb just outside Seattle. My life runs on routine. I wake up before the sun, pour black coffee into a dented thermos, climb into my old Ford F-150, and drive toward whatever job site needs muscle that day. By noon, my shirt is soaked with sweat, my hands rough with dust and concrete, my back aching in a familiar way that tells me I've earned my paycheck. I frame houses, pour slabs, fix mistakes other people never see. It's honest work, hard work, the kind that leaves you too tired to think about what's missing when you finally get home. My apartment is barely bigger than a garage. The kitchenette smells like old takeout containers I forget to throw away. The bed creaks every time I turn. The walls are thin enough that I can hear my neighbor's television through the drywall. It isn't much, but it's mine. No landlord breathing down my neck, no roommate leaving dirty dishes in the sink. Just me and the silence that fills the space after I kick off my boots and collapse onto the couch. I don't have big savings or big dreams. I pay my bills on time. On Fridays, I grab a beer with the guys from the crew if I'm not too exhausted to make the drive. We talk about the game, complain about the foreman, laugh at something stupid that happened on site. Then we go home. No fancy vacations, no 5-year plan, just day-to-day one shift bleeding into the next. I used to think that was enough, but somewhere along the way the quiet started feeling less peaceful and more empty, like the walls were closing in instead of keeping the world out. I'd sit on my couch with a cold beer in my hand, flipping through channels, and realize I hadn't spoken to anyone outside of work in 3 days. The silence wasn't restful anymore. It was heavy. It's been 2 years since my last real date. Not because I was heartbroken or angry, I just got tired. Tired of the same questions over dinner. What do you do? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? What are your hobbies? I'd answer honestly and watch the polite smile on their face fade when they realized my life wasn't impressive. I worked with my hands. I went home sore. I didn't have stories about climbing the corporate ladder or traveling to Europe. I was just a guy who built things and went home. I've been ghosted more times than I can count, left on red, stood up at restaurants where I sat alone nursing a water glass while the waitress gave me pitiful looks. I've had women tell me gently that they didn't see a future with me, which is code for you're not good enough. Eventually, I stopped trying. Being alone felt easier, safer. No expectations meant no disappointment. No risk of sitting across from someone and watching them decide I wasn't worth their time. But the loneliness crept in anyway. It didn't announce itself. It just settled into the corners of my apartment like dust I couldn't sweep away. Some nights I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was it. If I'd spend the rest of my life coming home to an empty apartment, eating frozen dinners in front of the TV, growing old without anyone who cared whether I made it through the day. I didn't tell anyone about that. Not the guys at work, not my mom who called every Sunday to check in. Definitely not Maya. Maya's been my best friend since high school, the kind of person who sticks around even when you don't make it easy. We don't talk every day, but when we do, it matters. She knows me better than anyone, which means she also knows when I'm lying to myself. I tried to keep my distance after the last disaster of a date, the one where I showed up and the woman took one look at my truck and said she forgot she had other plans. Maya called me out on it immediately. The call came on a Tuesday night. I was sitting on my couch half watching a rerun of some cop show when my phone buzzed. I almost didn't answer, but it was Maya, and ignoring her only made things worse. Her voice came through sharp and clear. No preamble, no small talk. "You can't just disappear from life, Liam," I sighed, muting the TV. "I'm not disappearing. I'm right here." "Yeah, sitting alone in that sad little apartment feeling sorry for yourself." I opened my mouth to argue, but she didn't give me the chance. "You're turning into a hermit. When's the last time you did anything that wasn't work or sitting on your ass?" I wanted to tell her to back off, that I was fine, that I didn't need her trying to fix me. But the truth was, I couldn't remember the last time I'd done anything that mattered. The last time I'd felt like I was actually living instead of just surviving. I'm busy, I said, knowing it sounded weak. Busy hiding. Her tone softened just a little enough to let me know she wasn't trying to pick a fight. Look, I get it. You got hurt. You got tired of trying, but you can't just give up. I rubbed my face, exhaustion settling into my bones. What do you want me to do, Maya? I want you to try, one more time. She paused, and I could hear the calculation in her silence. I have someone in mind. One blind date. If it goes badly, I'll buy you beer for a month. I laughed, bitter and tired. You've said that before. This time is different. How? Because this time I'm not setting you up with some friend of a friend who thinks construction workers are beneath her. This woman is real. She's been through things. She'll get you. I wanted to say no. I had a dozen excuses lined up. But Maya didn't back down. She never did. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew she was right. I couldn't keep living like this, waiting for something to change while doing nothing to make it happen. One date, I said finally. If it's a disaster, you owe me. Deal. We set it up for Saturday night. A cafe downtown, neutral territory, easy to leave if things went south. Maya texted me the details and a warning: be yourself. Don't try to impress her, just show up. I spent the rest of the week trying not to think about it. At work, I focused on the job. We were framing a house in a new development, long hours under the sun, measuring and cutting and hammering until my arms ached. The physical labor helped. It kept my mind occupied, kept the nerves at bay. But at night, alone in my apartment, the doubts crept back in. What if this was just another waste of time? What if I showed up and she took one look at me and decided I wasn't worth the effort? What if I was the problem, not the women I'd been meeting? Maybe I was too boring, too simple, too stuck in my ways to be what anyone wanted. By Saturday, I'd half convinced myself not to go. But I got in the truck anyway, drove downtown, parked a block away from the cafe because I couldn't find a closer spot. The street was quiet, lined with small shops and restaurants, the kind of neighborhood where people went to feel cultured. I felt out of place the moment I stepped out of the truck. The cafe was on the corner, all exposed brick and warm yellow lights hanging from the ceiling. Through the window, I could see mismatched wooden tables, people bent over laptops or talking in low voices. It smelled like coffee and cinnamon when I pushed through the door. I arrived 15 minutes early because I didn't know what else to do with myself. I picked a table near the window facing the door. Easy to spot her when she arrived. Easy exit if I needed one. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through nothing, already rehearsing polite excuses in my head. This isn't working out. I don't think we're a good match. It was nice meeting you. Then she walked in. She paused just inside the door, taking a breath like she was bracing herself for something. Shoulder-length brown hair tucked behind one ear. A loose gray long-sleeved shirt, wide-leg jeans that looked comfortable and worn. She carried herself like someone used to shrinking, trying not to draw attention. Her eyes scanned the room until they found mine. She nodded once, just once, and walked over. I stood up awkward and too quick, nearly knocking my chair back. Her voice was quiet. Careful. Hi. You must be Liam. Yeah, Laura. She nodded again and sat down across from me. We shook hands. Hers was small and warm, the grip firmer than I expected. For a moment, we just looked at each other, neither of us quite sure how to start. The conversation began the way these things always do. Safe topics. Easy questions. She told me she was a nurse at Harborview Medical Center working with burn patients. I told her about construction, about liking the feeling of building something solid, something that would still be standing long after I was gone. She asked if I'd always wanted to do that kind of work. I said no, but it found me, and I was good at it, so I stayed. She smiled at that small and genuine, "That's honest." I try to be. Most people don't. We ordered coffee. She asked for hers black. I did the same, even though I usually took cream. We talked about Seattle, about the weather, about the neighborhood. She mentioned she'd been working at the hospital for 3 years. I told her I'd been in construction since I was 19, started as a laborer, and worked my way up. It was fine, not bad, not great, just fine. I kept waiting for the moment when she'd lose interest, when the conversation would stall and we'd both make excuses to leave. But then she looked down at her sleeve. Her fingers traced the fabric hesitant. She took a breath and I saw something shift in her expression. Not fear exactly, more like resignation. Her voice came out calm and flat, like she'd practiced this 100 times. I should probably tell you something. I set my coffee down, giving her my full attention. She rolled up her sleeve. The scars were impossible to miss. Thick, raised lines running from her wrist up her arm, disappearing under the fabric toward her shoulder. They weren't faint or faded. They were permanent. Deep tissue damage, the kind that told a story without words. Burns. Severe ones. The cafe noise faded away. The hum of conversation, the hiss of the espresso machine, the clatter of dishes, it all became background static. The room narrowed down to just us, just her arm on the table, and my eyes taking in every detail I didn't want to stare at, but couldn't look away from. Her voice was steady, almost detached. No one wants to date me. She wasn't bitter. She wasn't angry. She was just honest. She watched my face waiting for pity, waiting for discomfort, waiting for the moment I'd make an excuse and leave just like everyone else probably had. I didn't look away. I didn't flinch. I reached across the table and gently pulled her sleeve back down, covering her arm. Not because I was uncomfortable, not because I couldn't handle it, but because she deserved care. She deserved to be treated like more than her scars. My voice came out quieter than I intended. I'm not going anywhere. She blinked, her expression caught between surprise and disbelief. I leaned forward, holding her gaze, and if I left now, I think I'd regret it for the rest of my life. Her eyes searched mine like she was trying to find the lie, the crack in my composure that would prove I was just like everyone else. But I wasn't lying. I meant every word. Something about the way she'd sat there, bracing herself for rejection, waiting for me to walk away, it hit me harder than I expected. I knew what it felt like to brace for impact. I knew what it felt like to believe you weren't enough. We sat in silence after that. Not awkward, just heavy. The weight of what she'd shown me, what I'd promised without fully understanding what it meant. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you really want to hear the story? I nodded. If you want to tell it. She took a breath, and then she told me. She told me about the fire, about waking up in the middle of the night to smoke so thick she couldn't see her own hands, about the heat, the panic, the hallway already filled with flames, about burning her arm as she tried to escape, the skin blistering and peeling as she stumbled through the house looking for her parents, about making it out while they didn't. She told it like someone who had repeated it many times, steady and controlled, each word measured and deliberate. There was no tremor in her voice, no tears, just the facts laid out like evidence in a case she'd already closed. I survived because I was closer to the door, she said. Sometimes I wish I hadn't. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't try to comfort her with empty words or tell her it would be okay. I just listened because that's what she needed. When she finished, the cafe noise slowly came back. The espresso machine hissed. Someone laughed at a nearby table. The world continued indifferent to the weight of what had just been shared. She looked at me then. Really looked at me. Not just glancing, not just checking to see if I was still there. She was searching for something. Her voice was quiet, almost fragile. So why are you still here? I didn't have to think long. The answer was already there, sitting in my chest like something I'd been carrying without knowing it. Because I know what it's like to survive something that changes you, I said, and I think I need someone who understands that. She nodded once. Just once. And in that moment I knew this wasn't just a blind date anymore. This was the beginning of something neither of us expected. Something that scared me as much as it pulled me in. We stayed at the cafe for another hour. The conversation shifted lighter now that the weight had been lifted. She asked about my work. I told her about the house we were framing, about the satisfaction of watching a structure go up from nothing. She told me about her patients, about the kids who came in with burns, and how she helped them learn to live in bodies that felt unfamiliar. There was a gentleness in the way she talked about them, a tenderness that told me she saw herself in every one of them. She didn't say it outright, but I heard it in her voice. She knew their pain because she'd lived it. She knew their fear because she still carried it. When we finally left, it was dark outside. The streetlights cast soft pools of yellow on the sidewalk. We stood outside the cafe, neither of us quite ready to say goodbye. She smiled, small and careful. "Thank you for not running." "I don't run," I said. "Not from things that matter." She looked at me for a long moment, then pulled out her phone. "Can I have your number?" I gave it to her. She typed it in, sent me a text so I'd have hers. A simple message, "This is Laura." I watched her walk toward the bus stop, sleeves pulled back down, shoulders still tense. She turned once to wave, and I waved back, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not excitement exactly, more like quiet curiosity mixed with hope. Like maybe, just maybe, I'd stumbled into something worth holding on to. I drove home with the windows down, the cool Seattle air rushing through the truck. My mind replayed the evening over and over. Her face when she'd rolled up her sleeve. The way she'd waited for me to leave. The look in her eyes when I didn't. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, it was after 10. The building was quiet, most of the lights already off. I climbed the stairs to my unit, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The apartment felt different somehow. Still small, still cramped, but not as empty as it had been that morning. I set my keys on the counter, kicked off my boots, and collapsed onto the couch. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a text from Maya asking how it went, but it was from Laura. "I'm glad you stayed." I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the screen. Then I typed back, "Me too." A few days passed before either of us texted again. I kept my phone face down most of the time, telling myself not to expect anything. I'd been down this road before. One good night didn't mean anything. People changed their minds. They got cold feet. They decided you weren't what they were looking for after all. But then on Wednesday afternoon, during a break at the job site, I checked my screen. A new message from Laura. "Hope your week's going okay." That was it. Simple. No pressure. No expectations. Just a small gesture that told me she was thinking about me. I replied the same way. "It's going. How about you?" From there, a rhythm formed. Short messages, nothing heavy. Some days, just a single line. Other days, a photo of the gray sky or her coffee cup during a break at the hospital. She sent me a picture of a mural she'd walked past on her way to work. I sent her a shot of the framing we'd finished that day. It felt easy. Safe. We started meeting again. Not calling them dates, just time. Once at a small park near my job site, sitting on a bench while she ate lunch. Another time at a quiet diner that stayed open late, where we ordered pie and talked about nothing important. She always wore long sleeves even on warmer days. I never commented on it. It wasn't my place to push. She talked about her work, about helping patients learn how to live in bodies that felt unfamiliar. She spoke with care, but I could hear the weight underneath. The exhaustion, the way she carried their pain on top of her own. One evening, she texted me asking if I wanted to walk. We met along a waterfront trail where the fog rolled in slow and thick, swallowing the sound of the city. She was quieter than usual, hands tucked into her sleeves, shoulders hunched against the cold. We walked for a while in silence. Then she spoke, her voice low. "A coworker said something today." I glanced at her. "What did they say?" "That I must be strong to deal with this every day." She paused, staring out at the water. "They meant well, but it reminded me how people look at me, like I'm always the sad story." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to tell her she wasn't just a story, that she was more than what had happened to her. But words felt cheap. So I just kept walking beside her, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. She didn't text me for a couple of days after that. I didn't push. I just sent one message, "I'm here." When she replied, it was with an apology for disappearing. I told her she didn't owe me anything. That seemed to surprise her more than anything else. That's when I started noticing how carefully she managed her distance, how she pulled back when things felt too close. I understood it more than she probably knew. I'd been doing the same thing my whole life. Different scars, same fear. A few weeks later, I told her about a volunteer build I was helping with, a playground for kids recovering from burn injuries. The project was organized by a nonprofit that worked with Harborview, and they needed extra hands. I mentioned it casually, not expecting much. Her response came back hesitant. "I don't know if I can do that." Why not? Being around all those people, the kids, their parents, everyone staring. I could hear the fear in her words, even through text. I didn't argue. I didn't try to convince her. I just sent one message later that night. "If you come, I'll stay right next to you the whole time." Saturday morning came bright and clear. The kind of Seattle day where the clouds finally break and the sun feels like a gift. I showed up to the site early, joining a handful of other volunteers already setting up materials. The playground was going into a small park near the hospital, a bright spot for kids who'd spent too much time in sterile rooms. I didn't expect to see Laura. I figured she'd stay home and I wouldn't blame her. But then I saw her walking toward the site wearing a short-sleeved yellow shirt. Her scars were fully visible in the sunlight, thick raised lines running up both arms. Her posture was stiff, her hands clenched at her sides. I walked over and smiled. "I'm really glad you came." She nodded, eyes scanning the crowd of volunteers and families already gathering. A few adults glanced her way and looked away quickly, the kind of polite avoidance that said they'd noticed but didn't want to be rude. Laura's jaw tightened. Then the kids noticed. They didn't stare the way adults did. They didn't look away. They asked questions. A little boy with a bandaged arm walked right up to her, tilting his head. His voice was matter-of-fact, no pity in it. "Your arm looks like mine." Laura froze. I caught her eye and nodded, letting her know I was there. Slowly, she knelt down to his level. Her voice was soft. "Yeah, it does." "Did it hurt?" "Yeah, a lot." The boy considered this, then held up his own bandaged arm. "Mine hurt too, but I'm getting better." Laura smiled, and it was the first real smile I'd seen from her in weeks. "You are. You're very brave." More kids drifted over, drawn by the conversation. They asked about her scars. They showed her their own. One little girl asked if she was a superhero because superheroes always had scars. Laura's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. She told them a story instead. She told them about a fire princess who fought flames and survived, who wore her scars like armor because they proved she was strong enough to keep going. The kids listened like she was magic, their eyes wide, their questions coming faster than she could answer. I stood back watching. For the first time since I'd met her, she wasn't hiding. She wasn't shrinking. She was glowing. We spent the rest of the morning building. I worked on framing the main structure while Laura helped paint the equipment. The kids followed her everywhere, asking her to sign their casts, to tell them more stories, to promise she'd come back. By the end, she was laughing her guard down, her smile bright and unguarded. Later, near the swing set, she pulled me aside. Her voice was thick with emotion. "I never thought I could do that." "You did more than that," I said. "You gave them hope." She shook her head, tears finally spilling over. "No, having you there made it possible." I reached out and wiped a tear from her cheek with my thumb. "You don't have to do this alone." She leaned into my touch just for a moment, and I felt something shift between us. Something deeper than friendship. Something that scared me because I knew how badly it could hurt if I lost it. After that day, things changed. She smiled more. She texted first sometimes. She sent me pictures of things that made her laugh. We grew closer slowly, carefully, like two people learning to trust again after being burned too many times. But life has a way of testing you when you're starting to believe things might work out. 3 weeks later, my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. The voice on the other end was calm and professional. "Is this Liam Carter?" "Yeah. This is Harborview Medical Center. You're listed as an emergency contact for Laura Bennett. She's been admitted. She collapsed at work from exhaustion." The words didn't register at first, then they hit me all at once. I didn't ask questions. I just grabbed my keys and ran. I drove to the hospital without thinking, without planning. My hands gripped the steering wheel too tight. My mind raced through worst-case scenarios. What if she was hurt? What if something had gone wrong? What if I got there too late? When I found her room, she looked small in the bed, pale under the fluorescent lights. An IV ran into her arm. Monitors beeped softly beside her. Her eyes were closed, but she stirred when I walked in. She tried to smile, but it came out weak. "I didn't want you to see me like this." I sat beside her and took her hand. "I'm here." She cried then. Not quietly. Not the controlled tears she'd shed before. Real, raw sobs that shook her whole body. She told me how tired she was. How scared she was that one day I'd decide it was too much. That she was too much. I squeezed her hand, my voice steady. "I'm staying. I'm not going anywhere." She looked at me through her tears, searching for the lie. But there wasn't one. I meant it. And for the first time, she let herself believe it. Word count: 4, 947. Target: 6, 800, 7,000. Status: incomplete. I need to continue part 1 to meet the word count requirement. Continuing now. The hospital kept Laura overnight for observation. I stayed in the chair beside her bed, refusing to leave, even when the nurses told me visiting hours were over. One of them, an older woman with kind eyes, looked at our joined hands and didn't push the issue. She just brought me a blanket and told me to get some rest. I didn't sleep. I watched Laura breathe, watched the monitors track her heartbeat, watched the IV drip fluid into her arm. Every time she shifted or made a sound, I was there, my hand tightening around hers to let her know she wasn't alone. Around 3 in the morning, she woke up fully. Her eyes found mine in the dim light. Her voice was hoarse. "You're still here. Where else would I be?" She shook her head, tears forming again. "Most people would have left by now. I'm not most people." She was quiet for a long time, just looking at me. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm afraid of this." "Afraid of what?" "Of needing you. Of letting you in. Because if you leave—" I leaned forward close enough that she could see every word written on my face. "I'm not leaving. You can test me, you can push me away, you can collapse in the middle of your shift and scare the hell out of me. I'm still not leaving." She closed her eyes, fresh tears sliding down her cheeks. "Why? Because you matter. Because when I'm with you, I don't feel like I'm just surviving anymore. I feel like I'm living." She pulled my hand to her chest, holding it there like an anchor. "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" "Trust someone. Let someone stay." I brushed her hair back from her face. "Then we'll figure it out together." She nodded against the pillow, exhaustion pulling her back under. But before she drifted off, she whispered something I almost didn't catch. "Thank you." They discharged her the next afternoon with strict orders to rest and cut back her hours. I drove her home, taking the corners slow, watching her out of the corner of my eye. Her apartment was small and warm, filled with plants and books. It felt lived in but lonely, like it had been waiting for someone to really step inside. Before I left, she asked me to follow her down the hallway. She opened a door and turned on the light. The room was covered in paintings. Canvases stacked against the walls, some finished, some half done. Faces half hidden in shadow. Arms marked with scars. bright colors cutting through dark ones, pain and strength mixed together on every surface. I stepped inside, taking it all in. Each painting told a story. Some were abstract swirls of red and orange that looked like flames. Others were portraits people with eyes that held too much sorrow. But all of them had something in common. They were fighting, surviving, refusing to be erased. My voice came out quiet. "These are beautiful." She stood in the doorway, arms crossed. I started painting after the fire. When words weren't enough, I turned to face her. "You should show these. People need to see this." She shook her head. "I can't." "Why not?" "Because then everyone would know. They'd see what I am." I walked over to her close enough to see the fear in her eyes. "They'd see what you survived. They'd see your strength." She looked away. "Do you ever get scared of staying with someone who's not fully healed?" I didn't hesitate. "We're all cracked in some way. I'm not afraid of yours." She met my eyes again, searching. "What are you afraid of?" The question caught me off guard. No one had ever asked me that. Not directly. I thought about lying, about deflecting, but she'd given me her truth. I owed her mine. "I'm afraid of not being enough," I said. "I'm afraid that one day you'll wake up and realize you could do better, that I'm just some construction worker with no real future, that you deserve someone with more to offer." Her expression softened. "You think I care about that? Most people do." "I'm not most people." She stepped closer, her hand reaching for mine. "You showed up when I needed someone. You stayed when anyone else would have run. You see me, Liam. Not just my scars, not just my past. Me." Something broke open in my chest. All the walls I'd built, all the defenses I'd kept up, they crumbled under the weight of her words. I pulled her into my arms, holding her like she might disappear if I let go. We stood there for a long time, neither of us speaking. Just breathing. Just being. That night, something settled between us. We didn't call it anything. We didn't need to. We just knew. Weeks passed. Summer rolled into Seattle slowly, the fog lifting now and then to reveal blue skies. Laura started wearing short sleeves more often. Not all the time, but enough to notice. Each time felt like a small victory, a step toward something neither of us had thought possible. We drove to the coast one weekend. The Pacific stretched out gray and endless waves crashing against the rocks. We walked barefoot along the sand, the cold water rushing over our feet. She laughed as the surf caught her off guard, soaking her jeans up to the knee. I'd never heard her laugh like that before. Free. Unguarded. I took her to meet my mom not long after. I was nervous in a way I hadn't expected. My mom had always been supportive, but I knew she'd see through any pretense. She'd know if this was real or if I was just going through the motions. We drove out to her place in Tacoma on a Sunday afternoon. The house was small but tidy, the kind of place that felt like home the moment you walked in. My mom answered the door before I could knock, her face lighting up when she saw us. She didn't hesitate. She hugged Laura immediately, stepping back to look at her properly. Her eyes took in the scars on Laura's arms, and for a moment I held my breath. Then my mom smiled, warm and genuine. "You're strong, I can see that." No pity, no awkward questions, just acknowledgement and respect. Laura's eyes filled with tears. She nodded, unable to speak. We spent the afternoon on the back porch, drinking lemonade and talking about everything and nothing. My mom told stories about me as a kid, about the time I tried to build a treehouse and nearly broke my arm falling out of it. Laura listened, smiling, her guard slowly coming down. On the drive back, Laura was quiet. Then she reached for my hand, gripping it tight. Her voice was thick with emotion. "Your mom didn't treat me like I was broken." "Because you're not." She cried then quietly, her head resting against the window. I didn't say anything. I just held her hand and drove, letting her have the space to feel whatever she needed to feel. Back in the city, our lives blended naturally. I helped her with her art classes for kids dealing with trauma. She listened to my stories about work, even the boring ones about permits and inspections. We cooked together, failed together, laughed at how bad we were at following recipes. One evening, sitting on her balcony with the city lights flickering below, she leaned her head on my shoulder. Her voice was soft. "I used to think no one could love someone like me." I pulled her closer, my arm around her shoulders. "Turns out you were wrong." She smiled, resting her scarred arm against mine. Not hiding it, not ashamed, just existing in a moment that felt bigger than both of us. And in that moment, I knew we were building something real. Not perfect, not easy, but solid. Just like the things I built with my hands every day. Only this time it was a life, a future, something worth fighting for. By the time fall arrived, Laura and I didn't need to define what we were anymore. We just were. It showed in the small things. In the way she left her mug on my kitchen counter like it belonged there. In how my apartment slowly stopped feeling like a place I slept and started feeling like somewhere I lived together with someone who mattered. There were no big speeches or promises. Just consistency. Showing up. Staying. Laura still had hard days. Nights when she woke from dreams she wouldn't talk about right away. Mornings when she stared at her arm longer than usual before getting dressed. When that happened, I didn't try to fix it. I'd sit beside her on the edge of the bed. Sometimes I'd take her hand. Other times I'd just be there, letting silence do its work. She told me once on a gray October morning when the rain hammered against the windows that this was the first time someone hadn't tried to rush her healing. Her voice was quiet, thoughtful. "Everyone always wants you to be okay, to move on, to stop carrying it." I looked at her rain-blurred light making patterns on her face. "You don't have to be okay on a schedule." She turned toward me, something vulnerable in her expression. That alone makes me feel safer than any words could. The job site I was working changed that month. We finished the development and moved to a commercial project downtown, a 6-story office building that would take us through winter. The work was harder, the hours longer. Steel beams and concrete pours instead of wood framing. I came home exhausted most nights, my shoulders aching, my hands stiff from the cold. But Laura would be there. Sometimes at my place, sometimes I'd drive to hers. We'd order takeout or she'd make pasta while I sat at her small kitchen table, too tired to do anything but watch her move through the space with quiet efficiency. She kept teaching art to the kids at the community center. I watched her grow more confident each time standing in front of them, with her sleeves rolled up, her scars visible and unhidden. The kids didn't see damage. They saw proof that pain didn't get the final say. And so did I. Every time she laughed with them, every time she encouraged one of them to be brave, I felt something expand in my chest. Pride, maybe. Or just the simple knowledge that I was witnessing someone become who they were always meant to be. My life didn't suddenly turn impressive. I still woke up before dawn, still drank bad coffee from a thermos, still came home sore and covered in dust, but now there was someone waiting for me, someone who asked how my day really was and meant it, someone who saw value in my simple life instead of judging it. One evening in late October, as we sat on her balcony, watching the sky darken over the city, Laura traced a finger along one of the scars on her arm. The motion was absent, automatic, like touching a rosary. Her voice came out soft. "I spent so long believing these made me unlovable, that they were all anyone would see." I looked at her, the streetlights below casting shadows across her face. "They're part of your story, not the whole thing." She smiled, but there was weight behind it. "I keep waiting for you to realize you could have someone easier, someone without all this baggage." I shifted to face her fully. "You think loving you is hard? Isn't it no harder than you loving me? We've both got scars. Mine just don't show on my skin." She searched my face, looking for the crack in my certainty, but there wasn't one. I'd made my choice the night we met when she rolled up her sleeve and waited for me to leave. I'd chosen her then. I chose her now. She rested her head against my chest and we sat like that until the cold drove us inside. November brought rain that didn't stop. Seattle drowned under gray skies and endless drizzle. The job site became a mud pit. We worked in waterproof gear tarps stretched over unfinished sections, every task taking twice as long as it should. I came home soaked through most nights, my clothes heavy with rainwater, my boots caked in mud. Laura had started picking up extra shifts at the hospital. The burn unit was understaffed, and she couldn't say no when they asked. She'd text me updates throughout the day. Long shift. Won't be home until late. Miss you. We started seeing less of each other. Not by choice, just circumstance. Our schedules didn't line up. When I had a rare evening off, she was working. When she finally got a day to rest, I was pulling overtime because we were behind schedule. The distance crept in slow. Not emotional distance, just the physical reality of two people trying to make their lives fit together when the world kept pulling them apart. I called her one night after a particularly brutal day. 14 hours on site, a steel beam nearly dropping on one of the crew. The foreman chewing us out because we were 3 days behind. I just needed to hear her voice. She answered on the fourth ring, sounding exhausted. Hey. Bad time. No, just got home, double shift. I'm about to collapse. I could hear it in her voice, the bone-deep weariness that went beyond just physical fatigue. I miss you, I said. There was a pause long enough that I thought maybe the call had dropped. Then her voice came back softer. I miss you too. We talked for a few more minutes, both too tired to say much that mattered. Before we hung up, she said something that stuck with me. Sometimes I feel like we're ships passing, like we're both so busy surviving that we forget to actually live together. I didn't know what to say to that, because she was right. We were surviving, working ourselves to exhaustion, coming home just to sleep, then doing it all over again. The connection we'd built felt strained under the weight of everything else. We'll figure it out, I said, though I wasn't sure how. Yeah, we will, but I heard the doubt in her voice. The next morning, I called Maya. We hadn't talked much since she'd set up the blind date. She answered with her usual directness. It's been months and you haven't said thank you. I'm hurt. I laughed despite myself. Thank you. How's it going? Good. Hard, but good. Hard, how? I explained about the schedules, about barely seeing Laura, about feeling like we were losing the momentum we'd built. Maya listened without interrupting, which meant she was taking it seriously. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then, you love her? The question caught me off guard. I hadn't said it out loud yet, hadn't even really thought it in those exact words, but the answer was already there sitting in my chest like something I'd been carrying without naming it. Yeah, I do. Does she know? I don't know. Then tell her, before the distance becomes something you can't cross. We hung up shortly after. I sat in my truck outside the job site staring at my phone. Maya was right. I needed to tell Laura. Needed to find a way to bridge the gap that was forming between us before it became a chasm. That weekend, I planned something. It wasn't elaborate. I wasn't good at grand gestures, but I knew Laura well enough to know she didn't need elaborate. She needed genuine. I texted her Friday morning. Can you take tomorrow off? I want to show you something. Her response came an hour later. I'll try. She managed to swap shifts with someone. Saturday morning, I picked her up before sunrise. She climbed into my truck wearing jeans and a jacket, her hair pulled back, curiosity written all over her face. Where are we going? You'll see. I drove east toward the mountains. The rain had finally stopped, leaving everything washed clean under a pale sky. We talked about nothing important, the podcast she'd been listening to, the book I'd started and couldn't finish, the way her coworker always microwaved fish in the break room. After an hour, we turned onto a narrow road that wound up into the foothills. Trees pressed in on both sides, their branches forming a canopy overhead. Laura watched out the window, taking it all in. "This is beautiful." "Wait." We reached a clearing where the trees opened up to reveal a view of the valley below. Mountains in the distance, the peaks dusted with early snow. The sky stretched wide and endless shades of blue and gray bleeding into each other. I parked and we got out. The air was cold and clean, carrying the scent of pine and wet earth. Laura walked to the edge of the clearing, arms wrapped around herself, looking out at the view. I came up beside her, close but not touching. "I found this place a few years ago, when I needed to get away from everything. I've never brought anyone here." She glanced at me. "Why bring me now? Because I want you to know that this is where I come when I need to think, when I need to figure things out. And lately, all I've been thinking about is you." She turned to face me fully, something shifting in her expression. I took a breath, steadying myself. "I know things have been hard, the schedules, the distance, but that doesn't change how I feel. You make me want to be better, to build something that lasts, and I don't just mean with my hands." Her eyes glistened. "Liam, I love you." The words came out simpler than I expected, but they carried the weight of everything I'd been holding back. "I don't need you to say it back. I just need you to know." She closed the distance between us, her hands finding mine. "I've been so scared to say it, because every time I let myself love something, I lose it." "You're not going to lose me." "You can't promise that." "Maybe not, but I can promise I'll fight like hell to stay." She kissed me then, and it felt like a question and an answer all at once. When we pulled apart, she rested her forehead against mine. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I love you too." We stood there for a long time, the world quiet around us, the mountains standing witness to something neither of us had expected to find. On the drive back, Laura was different, lighter. She talked about her plans for the art program, about wanting to expand it to more community centers, about maybe showing her paintings in a small gallery a friend had mentioned. There was hope in her voice, a forward momentum that hadn't been there before. I realized then that loving someone wasn't just about being there in the hard moments. It was about believing in their future enough to help them build it. The following week brought new challenges. A pipe burst on the job site, flooding the ground floor we'd just finished. We spent 3 days in water, up to our ankles, tearing out ruined drywall, replacing insulation, trying to salvage what we could. The foreman was in a constant state of rage. The client threatened to pull funding. Everything felt like it was teetering on the edge of collapse. I came home one night soaked and furious. My clothes ruined, my patience, worn to nothing. Laura was at my apartment waiting with takeout she'd picked up on her way over. She took one look at me and set the food aside. "Shower first, then you can tell me about it." I stood under the hot water until my skin turned red, washing away the mud and frustration. When I came out, she'd set up dinner at the small table, 2 beers already open. We ate in silence for a while. Then I told her about the flood, about the constant setbacks, about feeling like I was fighting a losing battle. She listened, then reached across the table to take my hand. "You know what I see when I look at you? A guy who's too stubborn to quit. Someone who shows up every day even when it's hard. Someone who builds things that last. Someone who doesn't run when things get messy." I squeezed her hand. "Sometimes I want to run, but you don't. That's what matters." Later that night, lying in bed with her curled against my side, I thought about what she'd said. About showing up. About not running. It occurred to me that we'd both been doing that since the night we met. Showing up for each other. Choosing to stay even when it would be easier to leave. December arrived with the kind of cold that seeped into your bones. The job site was miserable. We worked through frost and occasional snow, our breath visible in the air, fingers numb even through work gloves. But we were finally making progress. The building was taking shape, the structure sound the end visible on the horizon. Laura's art program expanded to 3 community centers. She was teaching twice a week now, working with kids who'd experienced trauma of all kinds. She came alive in those classes, her confidence growing with each session. I went to watch her sometimes sitting in the back of the room while she guided the kids through exercises in self-expression. One afternoon, a girl maybe 10 years old asked her about her scars. Laura didn't hesitate. She rolled up her sleeves and told the story, not the sanitized version, the real one. About the fire, the loss, the years of feeling like she'd never be whole again. The girl listened, then held up her own drawing. A house on fire flames reaching toward a sky filled with stars. A figure standing outside, half in shadow, half in light. "This is me," the girl said. "After." Laura knelt beside her, tears streaming down her face. "It's beautiful. You're beautiful." I had to leave the room. The weight of what I had witnessed sat heavy in my chest, something profound and painful and hopeful all at once. That night, Laura talked about starting a nonprofit, something focused on art therapy for burn survivors and trauma victims. She had ideas, plans, a vision that extended beyond the community centers. "I don't know if I can do it," she said, doubt creeping into her voice. "It's a lot of work, a lot of risk." "You can do it. I've watched you with those kids. You're changing their lives. What if I fail?" "Then you fail. But at least you tried. At least you didn't let fear stop you from building something that matters." She looked at me, something fierce and determined settling in her expression. "Will you help me, however I can?" We stayed up late that night, mapping out ideas on scraps of paper, dreaming bigger than either of us had dared to dream before. Christmas came and went. We spent it with my mom in Tacoma, a quiet day of too much food and old movies on television. Laura fit into my family like she'd always been there. My mom pulled me aside at one point, her voice low. "You're going to marry that girl, aren't you?" I glanced at Laura, who was laughing at something on TV. "Yeah, I think I am." "Good. Don't wait too long." January brought a new year and new challenges. The building downtown was finally finished. We had a small celebration on site, the crew sharing beers and congratulating each other on a job completed despite everything. I looked up at the structure we'd built, 6 stories of steel and concrete and glass, and felt a surge of pride. But with the project finished, I was out of work. The company had another job lined up, but it wouldn't start for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of unemployment, of watching my meager savings dwindle, of feeling useless. Laura was still working full shifts at the hospital while trying to get her nonprofit off the ground. The stress was showing. She was exhausted constantly. Dark circles under her eyes, her patience worn thin. We started arguing about small things. Dishes left in the sink. Plans made and broken because one of us was too tired. The distance crept back in wider this time. One night, she snapped at me over something trivial. I don't even remember what. I snapped back. The argument escalated fast, both of us saying things we didn't mean, frustration boiling over into words designed to hurt. She grabbed her coat, heading for the door. "I can't do this right now." "Then when?" "Because it feels like we're never on the same page anymore." She turned, eyes blazing. "Maybe because I'm trying to build something and you're just coasting." The words hit like a punch. I stood there stunned as she walked out and slammed the door behind her. I didn't follow. I just sat on the couch, her accusation echoing in my head. Was she right? Was I coasting? I'd finished the job. I was waiting for the next one. But what was I building beyond that? What was my vision for the future? I didn't have an answer. 3 days passed without contact. I wanted to reach out to apologize, to fix whatever had broken between us. But pride kept me silent. She'd walked out. She'd thrown the accusation, let her come back when she was ready. On the 4th day, Maya called. "What did you do? Why do you assume I did something?" "Because Laura called me crying." "So what happened?" I explained the fight, the words we'd thrown at each other, the silence that followed. Maya listened, then sighed. "You're both idiots." "Thanks." "She's scared, Liam. She's building something big and she's terrified it'll fall apart. And you're scared too. Scared that you're not enough for her. So you're both lashing out instead of actually talking. I don't know how to fix this. You go to her. You apologize. You talk like adults instead of wounded children. And you figure out how to be partners instead of just two people who happen to love each other." She hung up before I could respond. I sat with her words for a long time. Then I grabbed my keys and drove to Laura's apartment. She answered the door looking as exhausted as I felt. We stood in her doorway, neither of us speaking, the weight of the last few days sitting heavy between us. Finally, I broke, "I'm sorry." "I'm sorry too," her voice cracked. "I shouldn't have said that. You're not coasting. You're just processing." "You were right, though. I don't have a plan. I've been so focused on just getting through each day that I haven't thought about what I'm building toward." She stepped aside, letting me in. We sat on her couch, the space between us feeling vast. "I'm scared," she said. "Scared that I'm going to fail. Scared that you'll realize I'm not worth all this trouble." I turned to face her. "You're worth everything, but we can't keep doing this. We can't keep pulling away every time things get hard." "What do? We talk. We make a plan. We figure out how to build a life together instead of just surviving separately." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I don't want to lose you." "You won't. But we have to fight for this. Both of us." We spent the rest of the night talking, really talking. About her nonprofit, about my career, about what we wanted our future to look like. We made lists. We set goals. We promised to communicate better, to not let resentment build until it exploded. By the time dawn broke, we'd mapped out a plan. Not perfect, but solid. Something we could build on. Laura fell asleep on my shoulder as the sun rose over the city. I stayed awake, watching the light change, feeling something settle in my chest. This was what love looked like. Not the easy moments, the hard ones, the fights and the reconciliations. The choice to stay and build something, even when it would be simpler to walk away. February brought change. I started the new job, a residential development on the outskirts of the city. The work was familiar, comfortable. But I also started looking into other options. Trade schools, certifications, ways to advance beyond just labor. Laura filed the paperwork for her nonprofit. The process was complicated and expensive, but she pushed through. She started building a board of directors, reaching out to hospitals and community centers, laying the groundwork for something bigger than herself. We found a rhythm again. Weekly dinners where we talked about our progress. Weekend mornings spent planning together. Small victories, celebrated setbacks, navigated as a team. One Saturday afternoon, we drove to a warehouse space Laura was considering for the nonprofit. It was run down, the windows grimy, the floor cracked, but she saw potential. She walked through the space, gesturing, "Art studios here, a gallery space here, offices in the back." I looked at the bones of the building, already calculating what it would take to renovate. It's a lot of work. Too much. I shook my head. Nothing worth having comes easy. She smiled, and I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with. Scarred but strong. Afraid but brave. Building something beautiful from the ashes of her past. We stood in the middle of that empty warehouse, surrounded by dust and possibility, and I knew we'd make it work. Together. Word count, 4,248. Target, 6,807,000. Status incomplete. Continuing part 2 now. The renovation of the warehouse became our shared project. Laura secured a small grant from a local foundation, enough to cover basic repairs. I volunteered my weekends, bringing in favors from guys on my crew who owed me one. We worked through March, tearing out damaged sections, replacing rotted beams, installing new electrical. Laura was there most days, painting walls, organizing donation drives for supplies. She had a vision for the space that extended beyond just function. She wanted it to feel safe, welcoming, a place where people who'd been broken could come to heal. One afternoon, while I was installing drywall, a woman walked in. Mid-40s, nervous energy radiating off her. Laura greeted her, and I heard fragments of their conversation. The woman had been in a car accident, burns on her neck and shoulder. She'd heard about the program through the hospital. Laura showed her around the unfinished space, explaining the vision. The woman's eyes filled with tears when Laura showed her the paintings, the ones Laura had created in her own journey through grief. "You understand," the woman said, her voice breaking. Laura took her hands. "I understand. And you're not alone anymore." I watched from across the room, hammer in hand, and felt something shift. This wasn't just Laura's project anymore. It was becoming something bigger, a community, a movement, a place where survival transformed into something that looked like hope. By April, the space was functional, not finished but usable. Laura held the first art therapy session with 5 participants, all burn survivors, all at different stages of healing. I sat in the back corner, supposedly there to finish installing trim, but really just there to witness. Laura stood in front of them, sleeves rolled up, scars visible. She didn't hide. She didn't apologize. She just existed fully and authentically, giving them permission to do the same. "We're going to create something today," she said. "Not to show anyone, not to prove anything, just to give our pain somewhere to go besides our bodies." She distributed supplies, canvas, paintbrushes. No rules, no expectations, just freedom to express whatever they needed to express. The room fell silent except for the sound of brushes on canvas. I worked quietly, watching them create, each piece different, each one raw and honest and beautiful in its brokenness. At the end of the session, Laura had them share if they wanted. One by one, they held up their work. A woman painted flames that transformed into flowers. A man created a portrait of himself, half scarred, half whole. A teenager made abstract swirls of color that somehow captured grief and hope in equal measure. Laura stood among them, tears streaming down her face. This is what survival looks like. Not perfect, not pretty, but real. And that makes it beautiful. They stayed late talking, sharing stories, forming connections. When the piece finally left, Laura collapsed into a chair, emotionally spent. I came over and sat beside her. "You did something amazing today." She shook her head. "We did. None of this happens without you." I just hammered some nails. "You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You showed up every weekend. You made this possible." I took her hand, calloused and paint-stained. "We make a good team." "Yeah, we do." The nonprofit grew faster than either of us expected. By May, Laura had 2 regular classes running, a waiting list of participants and inquiries from other cities about replicating the model. The local news ran a story about her work. A grant organization reached out about funding expansion. She was thriving, but the success came with pressure. More administrative work, more fundraising, more responsibility. She started bringing work home, staying up late, writing grant proposals, responding to emails, planning curriculum. I watched her burn herself out slowly, the exhaustion creeping back. The dark circles under her eyes. The way she'd forget to eat until I reminded her. The tension in her shoulders that never fully released. One night in early June, I found her at her laptop at 2 a.m, crying over a grant application that had been rejected. I closed the laptop gently. "You need to sleep. I need to finish this. It'll still be there tomorrow." But what if tomorrow I lose the momentum? What if this is my only chance to make this work? I pulled her up from the chair, guiding her toward bed. "You're not going to lose it, but you will burn out if you don't rest." She let me lead her, too tired to argue. Once in bed, she curled against me, her body finally relaxing. Her voice was small. "I'm so scared I'm going to mess this up." "You won't." "How do you know?" Because I've watched you build this from nothing. Because you care too much to let it fail. Because you're the strongest person I know." She was quiet for a long time. Then, "Sometimes I feel like I'm that scared girl in the fire again, running through smoke not knowing if I'll make it out." I held her tighter. "But you did make it out. And you're not running alone anymore." She fell asleep in my arms, and I stayed awake thinking about strength, about how the people who seemed strongest were often the ones fighting the hardest battles, about how love meant holding someone through their fear, not trying to fix it. Summer brought new challenges on my end. The residential development hit complications. The developer ran out of funding halfway through. Paychecks started coming late, then stopped altogether. The crew scattered looking for other work. I tried to hold on, hoping the money would come through, but by July it was clear the project was dead. I was unemployed again. This time without prospects. The construction market had tightened, jobs were scarce. I spent weeks sending out applications, calling contacts, showing up at sites looking for day labor. Nothing stuck. My savings evaporated. Rent came due, and I barely made it. I started skipping meals to save money, stopped going out, stopped doing anything that cost money I didn't have. Laura noticed. She offered to help financially. I refused. Pride, maybe, or just the stubborn belief that I should be able to take care of myself. We fought about it. Her frustration at my refusal, my shame at needing help, the old patterns threatening to resurface. "This is what partners do," she said. "We help each other." "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not. But you're going to be if you starve yourself trying to prove some point." I wanted to argue, but she was right. I was letting pride destroy what we'd built. So I swallowed it and accepted her help. Alone, I insisted. She agreed, though we both knew I might never pay it back. August brought a break. A buddy from my old crew called about a job. Not construction, but related. Facilities management for a corporate campus. Steady hours, decent pay benefits. It wasn't what I'd imagined for myself, but it was work. I took it without hesitation. The job was different, cleaner, more structured. I wore a uniform instead of work boots. I fixed things that broke instead of building from scratch. It felt strange at first, almost too easy. But the regular paycheck settled something in me. I started paying Laura back. Small amounts, but consistent. She tried to wave it off, but I insisted. It mattered to me. Mattered that I could contribute, that I wasn't just taking. September marked 1 year since our first date. We didn't make a big deal of it. Just dinner at the same cafe where we'd met. We sat at a different table, but the memories hung thick around us. Laura looked around the space. "I was so scared that night." So was I. "I didn't think you'd stay. When I showed you my arms, I was sure you'd make some excuse and leave." I reached across the table, taking her hand. "I almost didn't come at all. I was convinced it would just be another disaster. Another person who'd look at my life and decide it wasn't enough. But you came anyway. Best decision I ever made." She smiled, and I saw everything we'd been through reflected in her eyes. The fear, the fights, the growth, the choice to keep choosing each other even when it was hard. After dinner, we walked along the waterfront. The city glittered across the water ferries, cutting white lines through the darkness. We didn't talk much, just walked hands linked, comfortable in the silence that came from really knowing someone. At some point, Laura stopped and turned to face me. "I want you to move in with me." The words hung in the air between us. Not a question, not quite a demand, just an offer, an invitation to take the next step. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything. We're already living together half the time anyway. Why keep pretending we're not?" I thought about my apartment, the place I'd lived alone for years, the space that had felt like a prison before it felt like a home. Leaving it felt significant, final, like closing a chapter and starting a new one. "Okay." Her face lit up. Yeah, yeah, let's do it. We kissed there on the waterfront, the city lights witnessing another promise made, another foundation laid for something we were building together. Moving in took 2 weeks. I didn't have much. Clothes, some furniture, boxes of tools. Laura made space in her closet, cleared out drawers, reorganized her apartment to accommodate 2 lives instead of 1. The first night in our shared space felt surreal. My clothes hanging next to hers, my toothbrush in the holder beside the sink. The small evidences of a life merged of 2 people choosing to build something together. We ordered pizza and ate it sitting on the floor of the living room, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes. Laura gestured at the chaos. Think we can make this work. We've made everything else work. This is different. This is every day, every morning, every night. No escape when things get hard. I set down my pizza. I don't want an escape. I want this. I want you. I want us figuring out whose turn it is to do dishes and arguing about the thermostat and falling asleep together every night. She crawled across the floor to kiss me. Good, because you're stuck with me now. We fell asleep that night in our shared bed, in our shared space, 2 people who'd survived their own fires, learning how to build something that wouldn't burn. Living together changed everything and nothing. The routines we'd built separately merged into something new. Laura's alarm went off at 5:30 for her early shifts, mine at 6 for the commute to the corporate campus. We'd navigate the small bathroom in a careful dance, passing toothbrushes and coffee mugs, learning the rhythm of sharing space with someone who mattered. The apartment felt fuller, not just with furniture and belongings, but with presence, with the knowledge that I wasn't coming home to silence anymore, that someone else's breathing would fill the darkness when I couldn't sleep, that my life had expanded beyond just me. But proximity also meant we couldn't hide our rough edges anymore. Laura's habit of leaving cabinet doors open, my tendency to drop my work boots wherever I took them off, small irritations that built up over weeks until they exploded into arguments that felt bigger than they were. We learned to navigate those moments, to recognize when we were actually angry versus just tired, to apologize faster, to choose our battles, to remember that loving someone meant accepting their flaws alongside everything else. October brought cooler weather and a shift at Laura's nonprofit. The board wanted to expand faster than she felt ready for. They pushed for a second location for corporate sponsorships, for growth that would require more staff and more of Laura's time than she could give. She came home from board meetings frustrated, drained. She'd sit at the kitchen table with grant proposals spread out, her laptop open, stress radiating off her in waves. One night, she slammed her computer shut. They don't understand. This isn't just a business. It's people's healing. You can't rush that. I looked up from the maintenance report I was reviewing. What do you want to do? I want to tell them to slow down, to focus on doing one thing really well instead of expanding before we're ready. Then tell them that. What if they pull their support? What if I lose the funding? I set down my work and moved to sit across from her. Then you'll find other funding. But you can't build something sustainable if you're compromising your vision to please people who don't understand the work. She rubbed her face, exhaustion settling into every line. I'm so tired of fighting, of having to justify why healing can't be measured in quarterly metrics. So stop fighting. State your position and let them decide if they're in or out. She looked at me like I'd suggested something radical. But over the next few days, I watched her consider it. Watched her draft an email to the board outlining her vision, her timeline, her non-negotiables. She sent it on a Thursday evening, then spent the rest of the night pacing. By Monday, 3 board members had resigned, the ones who'd been pushing hardest for rapid expansion. Laura took it as failure at first. Then, as the week went on, the remaining board members rallied. They brought in new people who understood the mission, who valued depth over breadth, who were willing to build something that would last instead of something that just looked impressive on paper. Laura came home that Friday with something light in her expression I hadn't seen in weeks. We're going to do this right, even if it takes longer, even if it's harder. I pulled her into my arms. That's my girl. She laughed against my chest. Your girl is stubborn as hell. I know, it's one of my favorite things about you. November marked a year since Laura had collapsed at the hospital. The anniversary hit her harder than either of us expected. She woke up anxious, couldn't eat breakfast, spent the morning staring out the window like she was watching for something that would never come. I called in sick to work and stayed home with her. We didn't talk much, just existed in the same space. I made tea she didn't drink, put on music she didn't hear. Finally, I just sat beside her on the couch and waited. Around noon, she finally spoke. That day when they called you from the hospital, I thought I was dying. I didn't interrupt. I thought, this is it. This is how it ends. Alone in a hospital bed just like my parents. And I was so angry, not scared, just angry that I'd fought so hard to survive the fire only to burn out anyway. Her hands shook. I took them in mine. Then you showed up, and I realized I wasn't alone, that maybe I'd never really been alone since the night we met, and that scared me more than dying, because it meant I had something to lose. I moved closer, my voice quiet. You're not going to lose me. You keep saying that, but how do you know? How does anyone know? I don't, not for certain, but I choose you every day. That's all any of us can do. Make the choice and keep making it. She turned to look at me, tears tracking down her face. What if one day you stop choosing, then we'll have had however many days we got, but I don't plan on stopping. Ever. She leaned into me and we sat like that for hours, not solving anything, just being present for the fear that came from loving someone enough that losing them would destroy you. The holidays approached with their own complications. Laura's extended family, who she rarely talked about, reached out about Thanksgiving. An aunt in Portland who wanted to reconnect, who'd heard about the nonprofit and wanted to support it. The invitation came loaded with history Laura wasn't ready to unpack. I haven't seen them since the funeral, she explained one evening while we made dinner. They all had opinions about what I should do, where I should live, how I should grieve. I stopped answering their calls. I chopped vegetables, letting her talk. But maybe enough time has passed. Maybe I should try. Do you want to try? She was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. Part of me wants to prove I'm okay, that I built something from the ashes. Part of me doesn't want to go back to being that grieving kid they all pitied. You're not that kid anymore. I know. But what if they only see her? We decided to go together. The drive to Portland took 3 hours through rain that never let up. Laura was quiet most of the way, her anxiety palpable. I kept one hand on her knee, steady pressure that said, I'm here. Her aunt's house was in a nice suburban neighborhood. Neat lawn, American flag by the door, the smell of turkey wafting out when we arrived. Laura stood on the porch for a full minute before knocking. Her aunt answered, older than I'd expected, with Laura's eyes. She pulled Laura into a hug that lasted 2 long, tears already flowing. Look at you, all grown up. Your parents would be so proud. Laura stiffened in the embrace. I saw the walls go up, the defenses snap into place. Inside, more relatives, cousins and uncle, people whose names blurred together. They all wanted to know about her scars, about the fire, about how she'd coped. Every question feeling like picking at a wound that hadn't fully healed. Laura answered mechanically. Yes, it was hard. No, she didn't remember much. Yes, she still missed them. The responses practiced hollow. Over dinner, her aunt brought up the nonprofit. Laura brightened slightly, explaining the work, the mission. But her aunt kept interrupting with advice. Have you thought about corporate partnerships? You should really expand to more cities. Have you considered a TED Talk? I watched Laura's light dim with each suggestion. Watched her retreat into herself. After dinner, I found her outside on the back porch, arms wrapped around herself against the cold. I came up beside her, You okay? They mean well, I know they do, but they don't see me. They see the girl who lost her parents, the victim who needs fixing, not the woman I've become. We can leave. She shook her head. No, I need to do this. I need to prove I'm not that girl anymore. We went back inside. Laura stood in the living room and cleared her throat. The conversation died down. Her voice was steady, stronger than I'd heard it all day. I need to say something. I appreciate you all wanting to help, to give advice, to support the nonprofit. But I didn't come here to prove I'm okay or to get approval. I came because you're family, and I wanted you to know I survived. Not just the fire, but everything that came after. And I built a life. Maybe not the one you think I should have built, but mine. The room fell silent. Her aunt's eyes glistened. Laura continued, I'm not the scared girl you remember. I'm someone who chose to turn pain into purpose, who found love when I thought I was unlovable, who created something that helps people heal because I know what it's like to feel broken beyond repair. She reached for my hand, and I did it with someone who sees all of me, not just the scars, not just the tragedy, all of me. Her uncle spoke up, his voice gruff. We see you, Laura. Maybe we just didn't know how to show it. The tension in the room shifted. Not completely dissolved, but softer. Her aunt stood and hugged her again, this time with more understanding and less pity. On the drive home, Laura was quiet again, but different, lighter. Thank you for being there, she finally said. Always. I mean it. I couldn't have said those things without knowing you were there to catch me if I fell. I glanced at her. You didn't need catching. You were strong all on your own. Maybe, but it helps knowing I don't have to be strong alone anymore. December brought a different kind of challenge. The facilities job I'd taken was stable but unfulfilling. I spent my days fixing broken fixtures and responding to maintenance requests. It paid the bills. It kept me busy. But it didn't feed something essential. I started drawing in the evenings. Not art exactly. Building plans. Designs for spaces that could be something more. A community center with natural light and gathering spaces. A school with accessibility features built in from the start. Structures that served people instead of just existing. Laura found my sketches one night while I was working late. These are incredible. What are they for? Nothing, just ideas. She sat beside me studying the drawings. They're not nothing. This is architecture. I'm not an architect. I'm a maintenance worker who used to frame houses. But you could be. You could study for it, get certified, turn this into something real. The idea lodged in my chest, equal parts terrifying and thrilling. I was almost 30, too old to start over, too settled to take that kind of risk. But Laura wouldn't let it go. Over the next few weeks, she researched programs, community college courses in architectural drafting, certification paths, ways to build towards something bigger without abandoning the stability we'd created. You believed in me when I wanted to start the nonprofit, she said one evening, spreading out brochures on our kitchen table. Let me believe in you now. I looked at the materials, at the vision of a future I'd never let myself imagine. What if I fail? Then you fail. But at least you'll have tried. At least you won't spend the rest of your life wondering what if. I enrolled in a night class starting in January. Introduction to Architectural Design. It felt ridiculous walking onto a community college campus surrounded by kids a decade younger, but the professor was older, grizzled, someone who'd worked construction before teaching. He got it. The coursework was harder than I expected. Math I hadn't touched since high school, software I'd never used, concepts that made my brain hurt. I spent evenings hunched over textbooks while Laura worked on grant applications beside me. Two people building futures they weren't sure they deserved. One night in late January, I nearly quit. A project I'd worked on for weeks came back with a failing grade. The design was structurally sound but aesthetically weak. too utilitarian. Not enough vision. I shoved the graded work aside. This is stupid. I'm a construction worker. I build what other people design. I'm not creative enough for this. Laura looked up from her laptop. That's bullshit, and you know it. Is it because apparently I can't even pass an intro class? She closed her computer and moved to sit beside me. You know what I see when I look at your work? I see someone who thinks about how people will actually use a space, who designs for function first, who cares more about making something useful than making something pretty. The professor doesn't care about that. Then maybe you need a different professor. Or maybe you need to find a way to blend both, to take your practical knowledge and add the vision on top of it. I looked at the failed project, frustration warring with exhaustion. I don't know if I can. You can. Because I've watched you solve problems on job sites that had everyone else stumped. I've seen you take broken things and make them work. You just need to trust that the same skills apply here. She was right. I knew she was right. But knowing and believing were different things. I retook the class the next semester. Same professor, different approach. This time I met with him during office hours, showed him my construction background, asked how to translate practical knowledge into design vision. He started treating me differently. Not as a struggling student, but as someone bringing real-world experience to theoretical concepts. My grades improved, my designs got stronger, and slowly I started believing that maybe I could actually do this. Spring brought growth on multiple fronts. Laura's nonprofit secured major funding from a healthcare foundation, enough to hire 2 part-time staff members and expand the art therapy program to serve twice as many people. She was able to cut back her hospital hours slightly, creating more balance. My class finished with a final project that earned praise from the professor. He encouraged me to continue to consider pursuing an actual degree. The idea still felt too big, but it didn't feel impossible anymore. We celebrated these wins together, small victories that added up to something that felt like progress, like we were both becoming who we were meant to be instead of just surviving who we'd been. But success brought new pressures. Laura's nonprofit attracted media attention. A local news segment turned into a regional feature, turned into a national magazine wanting to do a profile. The attention was good for fundraising, bad for Laura's anxiety. She didn't want to be the face of the organization, didn't want to stand in front of cameras and tell her story over and over. But the board pushed for it, said her personal experience was what made the mission compelling. We fought about it one evening in April. She wanted to refuse the interview. I thought she should do it, not for the board, but for all the people who needed to hear that survival was possible. It's not about me, she insisted, pacing our living room. It's about the work. The work exists because of you, because you turned your pain into something that helps others. That doesn't mean I want to parade it in front of millions of people. I'm not saying parade it, I'm saying share it. There's a kid somewhere right now who feels like their life is over because of scars they can't hide, and seeing you might be what saves them. She stopped pacing. Her expression conflicted. What if I can't do it? What if I break down on camera? I moved to stand in front of her. Then you break down, and you show them that it's okay to break down, that healing isn't linear, that you can be strong and vulnerable at the same time. She searched my face. Come with me. If I do this, I need you there. I'll be there. Always. The interview happened in early May. A film crew came to the nonprofit wanting to capture the space where the work happened. Laura wore a sleeveless blue dress, her scars fully visible. A deliberate choice. I stood off camera watching her sit across from a reporter who asked gentle but probing questions about the fire, about the survivor's guilt, about building the nonprofit from nothing. Laura answered with raw honesty, her voice steady even when tears fell. At one point, the reporter asked, "What would you say to someone who feels unlovable because of their scars?" Laura glanced at me, then back at the camera. I'd say that scars tell a story of survival, and the right person won't see them as flaws. They'll see them as proof that you're strong enough to keep going. I spent years believing no one could love someone like me. Then I met someone who saw past the surface to everything underneath, who chose to stay when leaving would have been easier. That person taught me that we're not defined by what happened to us. We're defined by how we choose to move forward. The interviewer followed up. Is that person here today? Laura smiled, real and unguarded. Yes. He's been here for every hard moment, every breakthrough, every setback. He's the reason I believe in second chances. The interview aired 3 weeks later. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in. Emails from burn survivors around the country asking how to start similar programs. Media requests for follow-ups. Laura's inbox exploded. She handled it with grace I didn't know she possessed. Delegated what she could. Said no when she needed to. Kept the focus on the work instead of herself. But I saw the toll it took. The exhaustion that crept back in despite her best efforts. June marked 2 years since we'd met. We took a weekend trip to the coast, needing distance from everything pulling at us. We rented a small cabin near Cannon Beach, spent 2 days doing nothing but walking on the sand and sitting by the fire. On our last evening, watching the sun set over the Pacific, Laura turned to me with something serious in her expression. I've been thinking about something. She started, her voice careful. What's that? About permanence. About what we're building together. My heart rate picked up. Okay. I know we haven't talked about it directly, but I can't imagine my life without you in it. I don't want to imagine it. I took her hand. I feel the same way. So what do we do about that? I'd been carrying the ring for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment, afraid there wouldn't be a right moment, afraid I'd mess it up. I pulled the small box from my pocket. Her eyes went wide. I've been trying to find the perfect time to ask you this, I said, my voice rougher than intended. But I realized there's no perfect time. There's just the truth, which is that you changed my life. You taught me what it means to be brave, to build something beautiful from broken pieces, and I want to spend the rest of my life choosing you. Every single day, I opened the box. Simple silver band with a small diamond. Nothing fancy. Just real. Laura Bennett, will you marry me? She stared at the ring, tears streaming down her face. For a terrifying moment, she didn't speak. Then, yes. God, yes. I slipped the ring on her finger with shaking hands. She launched herself at me, knocking us both into the sand, kissing me like she was trying to press the word yes into my skin. We lay there on the beach as the sun disappeared, engaged, laughing, covered in sand, completely certain and completely terrified. The drive back to Seattle felt different, like we'd crossed some invisible threshold into a future we were actively choosing instead of just stumbling into. We talked about timelines. Neither of us wanted a long engagement. Neither of us needed a big wedding. Just something real, something that reflected who we actually were. We settled on September. 3 months to plan something small. Immediate family and close friends. The nonprofit's warehouse space transformed for one day into something beautiful. Laura threw herself into planning with the same intensity she brought to everything, but this time there was joy in it, not stress, not obligation, just genuine excitement about marking this moment. I kept working, kept taking classes, kept building toward a future that included more than just surviving. Laura and I became partners in the truest sense, not just romantic, but actual partners in building a life that mattered. July brought unexpected news. My mom called on a Thursday evening, her voice shaky. Cancer. Early stage treatable, but cancer nonetheless. She needed surgery, would need help during recovery. I drove to Tacoma that weekend. Laura came with me. We spent the day with my mom asking questions, taking notes, trying to process the fear that came with the word that changed everything. My mom, ever pragmatic, waved off our concern. I'm tough. I'll beat this. But I saw the fear beneath her bravado. Saw my mother, who'd always been unshakable, facing her own mortality. Laura took my mom's hand. We're going to be here, for all of it. You're not doing this alone. My mom's eyes filled. You're good for him. You know that? He's good for me, too. The surgery was scheduled for early August. Laura and I took time off camping out at my mom's place. The surgery went well, clean margins. No need for chemo, just careful monitoring and regular checkups. But those 2 weeks changed something. Reminded us both how fragile everything was. How quickly the life we'd built could be upended. How important it was to hold on to the people who mattered while we still could. We pushed the wedding up to August instead of September. Why wait? Why pretend we needed more time when we both knew what we wanted? The day arrived faster than expected. August 23rd, warm but not hot. The warehouse transformed with string lights and simple flowers. 40 people. The nonprofit's first participants served as honorary witnesses, their presence a reminder of why any of this mattered. I stood at the front watching Laura walk toward me. She wore a simple white dress, sleeveless, her scars visible and beautiful. Her aunt from Portland walked beside her, tears already flowing. My mom sat in the front row, recovered enough to be there, her hand pressed to her chest. Laura reached me and took my hands. The officiant, a friend from my construction days who'd gotten ordained online, kept it brief. When it came time for vows, Laura spoke first. I used to think love was something that happened to other people. People without scars. People who hadn't survived fires that took everything. You showed me I was wrong. You showed me that love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who sees your broken pieces and stays anyway. Who helps you build something beautiful from the ashes. I choose you today. I'll choose you tomorrow. I'll keep choosing you until there aren't any more days left to choose. My throat tightened. I'd written vows, but the words I'd prepared felt inadequate. I spoke from the heart instead. Maya set us up because she was tired of watching me hide from life. And that first night when you showed me your scars, I thought I was staying because I understood pain. But I stayed because I saw strength. I saw someone who survived the worst thing imaginable and still chose to build something that would help others survive too. You didn't just change my life. You gave me one worth living. And I promised to spend every day proving that choosing me wasn't a mistake. That together, we can build something that lasts. We exchanged rings. The same simple bands we'd picked out together. Nothing fancy. Just real. The officiant smiled. By the power vested in me by the internet, I now pronounce you married. Kiss already. We did. The small crowd erupted in applause. My mom sobbed openly. Laura's participants cheered like we'd won something, instead of just promised to love each other. The reception was simple. Food from a local restaurant. Music from a playlist we'd made together. Dancing that was more swaying than actual dancing. Speeches that made everyone cry and laugh in equal measure. Maya cornered me at one point. Told you she was different. You were right. Thank you. Don't thank me. You did the work. You showed up. You stayed. That was all you. As the night wound down, Laura and I stood in the center of the warehouse, surrounded by evidence of lives built and rebuilt. The nonprofit she'd created, the future I was working toward, the marriage we'd just started. She rested her head on my chest. We did it. Yeah, we did. What now? Now we keep building, keep choosing each other, keep showing up. She smiled against my shirt. Sounds perfect. We drove to a small bed and breakfast on the coast for a 3-day honeymoon. Nothing extravagant, just time together without obligations or expectations. We slept late, walked on beaches, made love like newlyweds too happy to care about anything else. On our last morning, lying in bed watching fog roll past the window, Laura turned to me. Do you ever think about kids? The question caught me off guard. Sometimes. Do you? More lately, watching the kids in the program, seeing how they heal, it makes me wonder if we could create that kind of safe space for our own. I rolled to face her. Are you saying you want kids? I'm saying I want to think about it, talk about it, see if it's something we both want. I want whatever future includes you. If that includes kids, then yes. If it doesn't, then that's okay too. She kissed me soft and slow. Let's table it for now, but keep it on the list of things to figure out. We drove back to Seattle as Mr. and Mrs. Carter. The name still felt strange on her. She'd decided to take mine, though she'd keep Bennett professionally, a blend of old and new, of who she'd been and who she was becoming. September brought a return to routine. Laura's nonprofit continued growing. I finished another semester with solid grades. We settled into married life, which looked a lot like unmarried life, except for the rings and the legal paperwork. But something had shifted. A deeper sense of permanence, of building towards something that would outlast both of us, of creating a legacy beyond just survival. One evening in October, almost exactly 3 years since we'd met, we sat on our balcony watching the city lights. Laura had her sketchpad working on designs for a new program. I had my architectural drawings planning a project for class. She looked up. You know what I realized today? What's that? We're not just surviving anymore. We're actually living, building, creating. And it doesn't scare me like it used to. I set down my pencil. What changed? I stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. Stopped believing that happiness was temporary. Started trusting that we built something strong enough to weather whatever comes. I reached for her hand. We did build something strong. We're still building it. She squeezed my fingers. Yeah, we are. The city hummed below us, steady, alive, full of people fighting their own battles, building their own futures, choosing their own paths forward. We were just two of millions, but we were together, and that made all the difference.